beast dug its free hand into Jess's left leg, right below her waist. Jess screamed in pain as the beast drug its claws down her thigh. Slowly the beast wanted to make Jess suffer. It wanted her to feel the same pain it felt when she shot it. Jess's death was going to be slow. The beast tore its claw out of Jess's leg, just above the knee. Tears began to trickle down Jess's face. She yelled in pain. The beast didn't move for a moment. It simply watched as Jess tried even harder in vain to break free. Jess's life flashed before her eyes. She saw herself as a young girl hunting with her father again. She saw herself graduating school along with her friends again. She saw herself marrying Frank again. Then she saw the memories that hadn't yet been made. She saw her daughter looking up at her in the crib, her son learning how to walk. She saw herself teaching them both how to hunt, just as Jess's own father had. Seeing these visions constructed a burning will within Jess. She was not going to die in these woods, to the hands of some sadistic creature. She was going to make it out. She was going to see Frank again, and she was going to start a family. Just then Jess remembered something, a trump card she hadn't played, her last chance of escape. Jess removed one of her arms from the beast's grip and moved it down to her right leg. Jess watched as the creature reeled back its free arm. It was planning to strike. Jess got her hand around the grip of the revolver and pulled on it. The fire within the beast's eye grew brighter as it anticipated the kill. Jess tore the revolver from its holster and leveled it to the beast's head. Its eyes turned to track the revolver, meeting the barrel, just as Jess pulled the trigger. The noise was deafening. The powerful shot had knocked the revolver free from Jess's grip and had been thrown away from her. The beast screamed as it lost its grip on Jess, sending her falling to the ground. Jess hit the ground hard. Dazed, she looked up to see the creature writhing in pain, its hand covering part of its face. It turned to stare at Jess, the one eye visible now burning with an unimaginable fury. It removed its hand, showing Jess the massive hole the revolver had blown of it. A quarter of the beast's head was missing, yet somehow it was still moving. The beast, still crying in pain, began to stumble toward Jess, swinging its arms wildly at her. Jess turned and crawled toward her revolver. As fast as she could, the beast was a lot slower now, only just barely moving faster than Jess while it was on its feet. Jess could hear and feel the thing getting closer. The revolver was in arm's reach. Jess reached out as far as she could, only barely able to get the revolver's grip. She turned to see the beast close, moving towards her, flailing its arms. Jess fired twice, both shots entering the beast's chest. The beast let out a demonic cry, staggered and fell toward Jess. She let out a cry of pain as the beast fell onto her legs. Jess dropped the revolver next to her, her wrist in pain due to her frantically poor grip and the power of the cartridge. She leaned forward and tried to push the beast off her. With all her might, Jess was able to push the thing off her, her hands now soaked with blood, along with her jeans, now stained a deep red. Her leg was still bleeding heavily, although it seemed by some miracle the beast had missed her femoral artery, for if it had she would have already been dead. However, she would bleed out if she didn't stop it. Jess had forgotten to pack a trauma kit in her rush to get the creature, so she had to improvise. She took the rope off her bag and wrapped it around the base of her leg. She got the knot ready to tighten it, clenched her teeth, and shut her eyes. Jess pulled as hard as she could, and the rope cinching tight around her leg. Her scream echoed through the woods due to the immense pain. She let go of the rope and stopped for a second to wait for the pain to subside. Jess took the revolver from the snow and placed it back in its holster. She tried to stand, only for a sharp pain to flash through her leg. The gash left by the creature made it impossible for her to put any weight on it. Jess saw her rifle laying a few feet away from her. She crawled over it and took a hold of it. She removed the magazine, cleared the chamber. She would have to use the rifle as a makeshift crutch, and she wasn't planning on accidentally shooting herself after surviving this hell. She planted the butt of the rifle in the snow and pushed down as hard as she could, barely managing to lift herself off the ground. The pain in Jess's leg was immense, but she knew she had to get moving, else she would soon die in these woods. Jess limped her way back through the forest. Even in her damaged state, she knew the way back house. The makeshift tourniquet on her leg allowed Jess some relief. It had slowed the bleeding, but hadn't stopped it completely. Jess had to ignore the pain and keep moving if she ever wanted to see Frank again, to have her visions of her family come to fruition. Jess could feel her strength beginning to wane, a combination of the freezing cold along with the loss of blood. Every muscle in her body burned, as she could feel her heart rate begin to slow. Her body was begging her to stop, to take a break and lay down. The cold snow seeming like a warm bed to her. Jess began to lose hope. She still had a long way to go, and doubted she'd make it back. Jess began to slow down, her head now cast down toward the snow. Then Jess heard something. Something that made her bring her gaze back up. That made her heart race. Something she couldn't believe. Jess? Jess, where are you? It was Frank. He had left the house to find her. Although Jess had no idea what tipped him off to her being in danger, however, that didn't matter right now. All that mattered was that Frank found her. Frank, I'm over here. I need help. The two continued to call out to one another. Jess could hear Frank's voice coming closer. Eventually, she saw Frank in the distance. Frank quickened his pace when he saw the state Jess was in. He could see her limping with her rifle and a thin trail of blood behind her. Once Frank reached Jess, he carefully removed the rifle and moved her arm over his shoulder, supporting her better and allowing her to move faster. Here, I got you. What the fuck happened out there? It was a fucking demon, Frank, Jess said, feeling tears begin to well within her eyes. A demon? Jess, what are you talking about? What did this to you? A demon, Frank. The tracks I saw yesterday belonged to it. It almost killed me. Jess could barely get the words out of her mouth. She was losing strength. Well, clearly you beat it. It's all that matters. We'll get back to the house and I'll patch you up. You're going to be okay. I'm not letting you die on me. Those words gave Jess a faint smile. Even in this dire situation, Frank never failed to make Jess feel safe. However, Jess knew something was wrong. Her vision was fading. Her legs began to buckle. Jess, stay with me, darling. You're going to be fine. Just keep moving, Frank said quickly, attempting to hide the fear in his voice. It was then that Jess's legs fell out from beneath her, and she was unable to bring them back up. Frank caught her as she fell, pulling her back up level with him. Come on, Jess, you can do it. We gotta go. Frank was becoming frantic. Jess tried again to stand, but was completely unable to. Jess's vision began to fade as she was completely immobilized. Jess! Through faded vision, Jess saw herself being carried by Frank. She was barely able to hear what he was saying. Everything was muffled. Her vision began to fade in and out along with her hearing. She was moving in and out of consciousness, eventually through faded vision. Jess was able to see the house. Everything then faded to black. Jess awoke back in her house, or so it seemed. She laid next to a fire, underneath several blankets. Beneath her was a small mattress, most likely moved from one of the spare rooms. She tried to get up and move, but a sharp pain was sent through her now stiffened leg. Jess removed the blankets to inspect her leg. The left leg of her jeans had been cut off. The bandages were wrapped tight around the gash that was left by the beast. A stained deep red, a proper tourniquet wrapped tight around above it. Jess could see that the bleeding had stopped. Jess called out to Frank. If he were in the house, he'd want to know that she was awake. No more than a few seconds had passed when Frank came into view. He almost ran to Jess as soon as he saw her, embracing her tightly when he reached her. Jess, thank God. I thought I'd lost you. I thought you'd never wake back up. Frank's voice was broken, tears welling up in his eyes. You passed out completely. When I got you in the house, I cleaned your leg up and wrapped it best I could. And I kept you by the fire. I did all I could, but I was still terrified. Jess did her best to return Frank's embrace in a weakened state. How long was I out? For a few hours. Like I said, I was worried about you wouldn't make it. But I think deep down I knew you'd be fine. You were always a fighter. Frank let go of Jess and turned his attention to her leg. Here, let me check your bandages. Frank moved the blankets and inspected the bandages. Your bleeding stopped, that's good. But I need to give you a new set. Frank got up from Jess and got his kit. Carefully he cut the bandages from Jess's leg. The large gash across it was still prominent, although it had completely clotted. Frank wrapped a new set of bandages on tight. Once he was done, he looked back at Jess. Jess, what the hell happened out there? Jess recounted her experience to Frank the best way she could in her weak state, her voice quiet and weak, starting from leaving the house all the way until Frank had found her. She spared no detail, not even about the beast she had seen. She had no doubt Frank would believe her. Her leg was all the proof he would need. Once she was finished, Jess asked Frank a question on her own. Frank, how did you know I was in danger? Why come find me? It's simple, Frank said. I could hear you. More specifically, your rifle. I know you're a good shot, and the only reason you would have to shoot that much is if you were in danger, especially if I heard you fire that. Frank pointed with his thumb toward the dining room. Jess looked and saw her revolver laying on the table. So naturally I came to find you. Thank God I found you when I did. Jess smiled. Yeah, I had the feeling you'd come. Jess smiled, then fell, a saddened frown taking hold. She turned her head away towards the fire. I'm sorry, Frank. Jess's voice had come quiet, subdued. I could have gotten myself killed. I should have been prepared more, been more careful. I shouldn't have messed with. Frank quickly interrupted. Jess, stop. Jess' head quickly turned back to Frank, his face far more serious than she'd ever seen it. It's not your fault you got hurt. Couldn't have known what that thing was. It's only natural for a hunter to chase an unknown trail. You think I wouldn't have done the same thing? Frank let out a small chuckle. Whenever you told me about the tracks, I was jealous. I wouldn't be able to come with you. I just didn't tell you. Couldn't steal your excitement. Well, at least couldn't have waited for you to feel better. I should have known it would be dangerous, Jess stammered over her words. Frank quickly replied. Every hunt is dangerous, Jess. Like I said, you couldn't have known this would happen. Who in their right mind would expect to get attacked by some shape-shifting demon? Once again, if the roles were reversed, I would have gone after it too. Frank kept his smile, Jess, and if you're still worried about how you could have died, it doesn't matter. You didn't die, and you even managed to kill the thing. Frank kissed Jess on the forehead. You're strong, Jess. Don't ever forget that. Now let me help you to the bed. It's probably a lot more comfortable than the floor. Frank let down a hand. Jess took it and pulled herself up. Once again, Frank supported her and helped her walk to the bed. The next several weeks blurred themselves together in Jess's mind. She was unable to get up from the bed for the first two, and had to rely on Frank to help her with everything. He brought her food, water, coffee, anything she needed. Luckily, with crutches, she just barely managed to get to the bathroom on her own. Every time she got up, she had to convince Frank she could make it on her own, as long as she had the crutches, much to Frank's chagrin. Jess knew Frank was only trying to help, but she never liked having to rely on other people, even her husband. Luckily, a few days after Jess was attacked, Frank had gotten better and was able to hunt. He only needed to once, as the buck that Jess had killed provided them more than enough food for a few weeks. It was only at the beginning of the third week was she able to walk. They needed more food, and Jess, although she could walk with a limp, was in no shape to be hunting. Frank would have to go on his own. Jess began to grow concerned. She saw Frank loading his rifle and prepping his bag. Frank looked over at Jess on the couch. He could see her eyes were wider than normal. She was tensely looking out the window, shaking. He had to calm her down somehow. Jess, I'll be okay. After all, you killed it, right? Frank knelt next to Jess, laying his hand on her shoulder. The thoughts of such a recent event coursed through her mind, a never-ending barrage of images. Not only what she had seen, but what could happen to Frank. How do we know that for sure, Frank? What if it survived? What if there's more of them? Jess looked at Frank. A look of concern painted across her face. Listen, we've been hunting in these woods for years, and neither of us has ever seen anything like that. There must only have been one of them, not only because we've never seen it with our own eyes, but we've never seen anything like the tracks you saw either, Frank said calmly, never moving his hand or breaking eye contact with Jess. These words put Jess to some ease. Frank was right. It most likely was a one single occurrence. Not only had Jess never seen something like that before, she'd also never heard of anyone telling a similar story. She had heard of other legends of creatures, but nothing like what she had seen. You have a point. Jess paused for a second. Yeah, you're right. The thing is gone. Jess didn't know whether she believed what she said or was just trying to convince herself that Frank wasn't in danger. Just be careful, hon. I'd hate if something happened to you. I will, Jess, I promise. Frank kissed her, got up, took his rifle and his bag, then walked out the door. Jess watched through the window as Frank moved out into the still, laden snow, her fear somewhat relaxed, but still ever present. The only thing Jess could do was wait. It would be best if she found something to distract herself from her thoughts. Jess's eyes panned to the bookcase, sitting in the living room, hoping for something to catch her eye. She got up and took a book. She wasn't looking for anything specific, just something captivating enough to kill the time. She went back to the couch and lay down. She began to read. Time quickly slipped away from Jess. She had become captivated with the stories told by the pages. Before she knew it, over an hour and a half had gone by. However, Jess was immediately pulled to reality by a loud thud on the front door. Her heart began to race. Her mind immediately went to the beast. Slowly and as calmly as she could, she put down her book and got up from the couch. She went in the bedroom and got the rifle from the cabinet. Slowly keeping the rifle toward the doors, she moved to it. Her breathing was heavy and her heart pounding in her throat. Jess came to the door and opened it slowly and screamed when she saw him. Frank's body laid in the snow just in front of the door. His head aimed at her, pale, his eyes glazed over, their irises white as the snow, a large pool of blood beneath him, beginning to freeze. Jess dropped her rifle and fell to her knees, tears falling down her face. Frank had been disemboweled. A large gash displayed on his stomach, several long gashes laid along his arms and his legs. Jess couldn't move. The only thing she could do was wail and hold Frank's corpse. Her head still aimed at the ground. She then saw two black legs move into her field of view. Slowly she looked up and saw the beast standing there. Jess didn't have time to react. The beast grabbed her by the throat, pinning her to the ground. Jess tried her best to scream, in vain hope someone would hear her and help. However, nobody would come. The beast raised its claw hand, the fire in its eyes burning brighter than ever. Jess screamed as its arm tore through her chest. Jess woke up with a scream. She looked around the room. She was still laying on the couch. The book that was once in her hands had now fallen to the floor next to her. The night terror she had since she encountered the beast had still not gone away. Every night was the same. She'd be back in those woods, back with the beast. However, she'd never be able to escape it, and her death would always be near. However, this was the first one that involved Frank, making it far worse. Jess stayed on the couch for a second to calm down. She cupped her face in her hands and sighed. She then got up, limping to the kitchen. She needed coffee. She didn't want to fall asleep again. Seeing the beast was something she dreaded every night. Once her coffee was brewed, Jess knelt back down to the book that lay on the ground. She decided the dining room might be a better place to read it. It would be harder to fall asleep in a chair. About another 2 hours had passed, and Frank came back in the house. "Hey," Jess said excitedly. "Managed to get anything?" Frank returned Jess's joy. "Yeah, I managed to get another buck. Damn thing almost got away, though." Frank took his rifle off his shoulder, placing it next to the door. He did the same with his revolver, which laid in the holster in front of his waist. "I'll go out and clean it in a bit." He turned his attention back to Jess. "How's your leg doing?" "How about I show you?" Jess got up from her chair and stumbled over to Frank. "Geez, I didn't know you day drank," Frank said, chuckling to himself. "Oh, shut up and come here," Jess said, laughing along with Frank. They embraced and she kissed him on the cheek. Then, without warning, the image of Frank's body flashed in Jess's mind. His glazed eyes burned into her head. She shuddered. Frank nodded, noticed Jess's trouble. "Hey, you okay?" Frank said with a hint of concern. "What? Yeah, I'm fine. Just been sitting down for a while. My leg still hurts, you know." Jess had told Frank about the nightmares. But she still didn't want to tell Frank about this one. She didn't want to retell it and have the scene play in her mind again. The rest of the day went by normally. Frank skinned and cleaned his kill before serving it for dinner. Jess and Frank talked and played games just as they had been doing for the past 2 weeks. They then went to bed. The next few months were the same. Once Jess's leg healed, the two hunted together, neither of them wanting to go alone, just in case the beast was still out there. Eventually, the bitter cold of winter was washed away by the calm rains of spring, followed by the harsh heat of summer. The memory of what happened the day never left Jess's mind, but her fear of ever seeing that thing again did. If it wanted to find them to kill them, it would have done so already. It was a warm summer morning when Jess and Frank went out to hunt together. They had found tracks left in the loose soil and were tracking whatever left them. Eventually they passed a clearing, the same one where Jess had first shot at the beast. She looked over and the memories of the day shot through her head. Frank noticed her gaze. "Hey, you still with me, Jess?" "What? Yeah, I was just thinking." Jess looked back at Frank, trying her best to hide her thoughts. However, Frank knew her too well. "Don't worry about it, Jess. The thing is long gone," Frank said with a smile. "Yeah, I know." Jess returned his smile. "But the worry is still there, as unreasonable as it is."